Okay, so as usual, I'll be doing an overview of what happened in the SMW world over the last year. Here I will start by looking at some fun statistics about things that happened, comparing the state of the current project with how it was during the last SMWCon in Europe, the one in Berlin. Then we'll have a more detailed look at the new features that were introduced by the two major releases we had. After this, we will have a look at the upcoming features. So this will include the 2.1 release and also some thinking about what can happen after that. And we'll round up by looking at how you can actually contribute to the SMW project itself. So a big difference with last year is that we had 7 different releases during the last 12 months. Last year, this was exactly 0. And during last SMWCon here, we mentioned that we wanted to improve this and have more regular releases and get the features out to you. So we definitely did succeed at that. And we had 2 big releases, which are 1.9 and 2.0. So you might be wondering what this 2.0 is about. Did we rewrite all of the code, or did we add like a whole pile of new features? And the answer there is no. It's just another major release in the same category as the 1.8 and 1.9 releases. And the change in the version number is coming from us wanting to be SAMVer compliant. SMWCon stands for semantic versioning, so it's very appropriate that Semantic MediaWiki now complies to it. So how this works is that version numbers are split into 3 parts. So you have the major part, the minor part, and the patch part. And each of these parts has specific meaning. If you have a release that only contains bug fixes, then you increment the patch part. So if the patch part is incremented, you know it just contains bug fixes and nothing else. And it's very useful information for your users. The minor part is which you increment if there are things that are not bug fixes, but also not breaking changes. So this can include new features, this can include internal refactoring, this can include performance enhancements, and the like. And then if you have a breaking change in your public API, whatever that means, then you need to increment the major version number. So suppose you only want to get bug fixes, and you don't want to also risk your system changing in ways that you need to do more work for, then you can specify you just want version 2.0.x, and you will just get bug fixes and no other changes. On the other hand, if you want to get new features, but you don't want to get any breaking changes because you first want to do more real testing to see if the extensions you're using are not breaking, and if you're not using any of the functionality that was changed in a breaking fashion, then you can specify that you just want version 2.x, because as soon as we make a breaking change in our public API, we will bump to version 3. Something. Now, we're defining our public API as the things in SMW userland. So these are things such as parser functions and special pages and API modules. So in these, we will not make any breaking changes until we go to version 3.x. However, we also have internal APIs that extensions are using, and unfortunately these are very badly defined, and it's not feasible for us to not break them for a very long time. So it's possible that in version 2.1 and version 2.2 that the internal APIs see some breaking changes, so that extensions to SMW are no longer compatible. So if you want to completely avoid that, then you can just stick to 20x and be sure there are also no such breaking changes in the internal APIs. And you can read more about this semantic versioning standard at semver.org. So, as usual, we'll have a look at the code base. This year we had contributions from at least 24 different developers in the last 12 months, bringing us to a total of 79 different contributors. And there is some margin of error here. In the 79, some people are probably counted more than once because they used different Git accounts or whatever. But the error is bigger in the other direction, since we're getting contributions from people that just provide us with a patch and that then end up being merged into the code base by other people. So that's not included here. As for the number of changes, last year we had more changes than any other time before. We had roughly 1,500 changes to the code made, and that's up from roughly 1,000 changes at the last SMWCon, which again at that point was the highest we had before. So this is increasing in the last few years, which I personally think is caused in part by the move to Git, or more recent move to GitHub, and just also the development speed recently picking up. Looking at the number of lines of code, this has followed a similar trend since the previous 12 months. In both cases, about 7,000 lines of code were added. So this year, these 7,000 lines are coming from a very different reason, which we will see on the next slide. And in case if you're wondering what this bump here is, we lost several thousand lines of code. That's the removal of SQL Store 2. Yeah. So a lot of new lines were added because we had a very big focus on adding more tests to our code base. And the main motivation for adding tests is, okay, so let's start with how we used to develop SMW several years ago and how we used to release it. So we would make a release, and after this we would go make enhancements, add new features, and while doing so we broke things, because you accidentally break things if you change code. That's just how it works. So we ended up with our development branch being destabilized, which then made it difficult to make new releases, because then in order to make a release that was not full of bugs, we would first need to go test the code manually and see, oh, is everything still working? And of course, this is a process that takes a lot of effort, so this slowed down releases a lot, and it's also very error prone. You will miss things, and yeah, especially in like the more obscure features that you as a developer might not even know about, or know about how exactly they are intended to work, because at the moment there literally is nobody that, no developer that knows all of the different features of SMW. So having automated tests for this is a great help in speeding up releases and preventing bugs in our software. And as the developers in the room probably know, it's extremely difficult to add tests to a legacy code base, especially if this code base is using fun things such as global state and static binding and all this nice stuff. And 2 years ago, we had exactly no tests, so we had no test coverage. And then 1 year ago, we made great progress, and we covered about 1/5 of the code base, which probably roughly translates to 1/5 of the functionality. And then the amount of progress we've made since, I think personally is really astounding. If you've would have told me this last year that we would make this much progress, I would say, nah, that's not going to happen. This is way too much effort. And we're now at 2/3 coverage. And huge props there to MW James, who did almost all of the work here. He did really amazing work in getting all this done. I'm really impressed there. Oh yeah, also note, I should have said this at the start of the presentation, of course. The things that I'm presenting here are not things I did. These are things that happened in the SMW world. So I don't want to take the credit for the things that are done here because they've mainly been done by other people, with me mostly just facilitating and coordinating. In more absolute numbers, in the SMW 1.9 release, we had about 1,300 tests, and in the current development version, we nearly doubled this. And if you're getting the code, you can also, of course, if you want to verify things are working on your system correctly, on your environment, your version of PHP, and how you configured your wiki, if everything is still working, then the tests are also a great tool there. You can just see if they run, and if they do, that's a pretty good indicator that most of the things will work correctly. This is an image which I also showed last year. We were very happy to announce we were using continuous integration there. And what this means is that for every change that's made to the code, we're running the tests. So we're no longer accepting changes into our code base that are breaking the tests, which is part of our change policy to not destabilize the master branch, and being able to release faster and being more friendly towards the users that are running the master branch. And what's also very nice about this is that we're not just running the tests on one particular environment. So again, several years ago, the developers that were making changes would just manually test and see if they did not break something related to this. But of course, you might break it only on a different environment. So if you're running Semantic MediaWiki on MySQL with a specific version of PHP, you might have accidentally broken the SQLite support, and you will just not know, unless you also go test this on SQLite, of course. But that's so much effort, and nobody basically did this. So we were very happy to announce then that we had this CI support where we ran all of our tests against different versions of PHP. So in that case, it was PHP 5.3 up to 5.5. And we were running with both MySQL and SQLite. And over the last year, we've made a lot of progress there, which makes the slide slightly more difficult to read. We're now running with PHP 5.3 up to 5.6. And we're also running with the hip-hop virtual machine. To our database support of MySQL and SQLite, we added Postgres now. So we know when we are breaking Postgres. And we're now also running against different versions of MediaWiki. We're running against the latest development version of MediaWiki, so we know when some breaking change occurred in core. And we're running with different stable releases. So for instance, with 1.23 and more importantly with 1.19. So we know we're actually still maintaining compatibility with the things we're saying we are maintaining compatibility with, and don't accidentally break support for 1.19, then end up releasing this and only noticing later because a user running 1.19 tells us. And the most recent addition, and one that I'm really excited about, is that we're now running the test as well with Jinafuseki and with Virtuoso, so we know the triple stores are not totally broken. I mean, in the past, if people came ask me, yeah, can I use Forstore or whatever particle store? And then the answer would always be, Yeah, most things will work probably. You need to try it out. And that's not really a professional way to go about this. So now we can say with a much higher degree of confidence that SMW is working correctly on these systems. Till when do I have time?
4.
Oh, oh dear. Yeah, we're also now tracking various metrics. So we're tracking our code coverage, making sure this continues going in the right direction. And we're also tracking code quality metrics such as NPAT complexity, cohesion, coupling, all these things. And as part of our effort in moving the code towards higher quality, so we have less bugs and can develop at a higher frequency. So of course, the code is not everything that makes up the project. We have this very fantastic community, and I looked up how many emails we had on the user list, and this really surprised me. Apparently, we had over 2,000 emails on the user list, and we had about 500 emails on the developer list. As to our wiki, we had over 5,000 edits and over 1,000 new pages created. We moved our issue tracker. We now have a dedicated issue tracker on GitHub, which makes it a lot easier to find things and to tag them. And at least 174 issues were filed on this since it was created, a bit less than a year ago, I think. And I tried to find a distribution of what the issues were about, so how many of them are bugs, how many of them are feature requests, etc. And I found that a good portion of them are not tagged, so I don't actually know. But what I can tell you is that at least 52 of them were about bugs, and at least 21 of them were feature requests. So I'm going to go over this very quickly then, since this was released quite some time ago. So new features in the SMW19X series, a new special page about concepts. On special statistics, you now have semantic statistics, so you can see how many properties you have, how many values you have, how many different data types, how many queries, all this nice stuff. You can retrieve this info now via a new API module called SMW info in a machine readable format. And this is, for instance, used by the earlier mentioned Wiki apiary, which is tracking over 1,300 semantic MediaWikis. And there you can, for instance, view the biggest semantic MediaWikis, as in the ones with the most properties. So that's also a nice thing to know if you want to look at examples of big SMWs and how they're doing things. The special properties page has a new search form. And there is this new API module that allows you to get the semantic information stored on a particular page or a particular sub-object. Some other functionality added in the 1.9x series is some new special properties. So you can now, for instance, just get the images that's using the GIF format if you would want to. If you're viewing all the revision of a page, it can now have the fact box shown. There is this query parameter now supported in the refresh data script, so you can just refresh a subset of your wiki and specify this with all the power of the Ask Query language. And there are many more additional features which you can view in the release notes, of course. And SMW 1.9 was the first release to have support for a composer. So moving on to the most recent big release. Our main focus in this release was stability and quality because we were not really satisfied with the amount of bugginess and the amount of regressions, and we really wanted to draw a baseline of functionality and then make sure this would not further regress. So that's why we put such a focus on tests and are changing our policies towards how we incorporate new code. And yeah, really this is all about avoiding unintended side effects. So another highlight for the 2.0 release is the improved particle store support. So as you can see here, we have now support for JavaFuseki as of 2.0. And we enhanced support for both Virtuoso and Forstore compared to 1.8. And as we saw earlier, we're now really confident about JavaFuseki and Virtuoso since they're tested on our continuous integration system. This is also an extract, this image, from our new compatibility matrix, which you can find linked in the documentation, which outlines compatibility with different, well, these things, also with different databases like MySQL and Postgres, and with different versions of PHP and different versions of MediaWiki. Sub-objects were improved. You can, they are now included in the RDF export, and you can now sort them. Before this was pretty random based on the sub-object hash, but you can now specify a sort key and notation. So moving on to the upcoming release. First of all, there is no release date for this yet, but I'm guessing this will be in 1 or 2 months, roughly that timescale. One new feature that's already in is search by, well, support for SMW queries in the MediaWiki search. And this is not enabled by default. You need to enable this in the configuration. But if you do this, you can put the description part of an ask query in the search field. So for instance, here you're just getting all the cities, which is not very exciting since you can do this in other ways. But since you can do full ask queries, you can get all the cities that are located either in England or in the US. This is the search by property form as in the 2.0 release, and this was enhanced to this. So this is how it will look like in the 2.1 release. Also, there has been there has been this focus on quality and stability, and this is now moving on towards performance. So we're now looking at where the bottlenecks are. Also, some new infrastructure has been added for us to be able to see what's taking a lot of time in the code, which is now run on the CI as well. And related to this is that we're now supporting the HipHub virtual machine as of the 2.1 release. Now, of course, we don't really know all the things that will go into the 2.1 release. And it's very hard to know what will happen beyond, because in the end, it's what people contribute. It's the teamwork that's involved. And in the previous incarnations of this talk, I've always speculated a bit on what would happen. Often these things did not happen, or they happened differently or at a different time. And a lot of the things that did happen during the last year, nobody was predicting during last SMWCon, because it really depends on what people contribute and what they are interested in working on. So which brings us to how you can contribute to the project. And you don't need to be a developer. That's the first thing. There are many very different ways in which you can contribute, some of which are at the moment underrepresented in the people working on SMW. So one obvious way is just if you're the user and you run into a bug, or you have this great idea for an enhancement, file it on our issue tracker. And on our new issue tracker, we're also more responsive than on the old one. So yeah. While we now have these tests and this automated infrastructure for running them, it's still nice for people to actually test the software before the release. And especially to test certain risky features for which we don't have tests yet or something. So we have a testers group, and if what we're basically doing, if a developer wants some particular change to be tested, then they will ping the testers group and ask, hey, could you have a look at this? And see if everything still works fine. So if you want to become part of this, then ping me and I will add you to this group. You can also help with enhancing the documentation. You can help with enhancing the translations or adding entirely new ones. You can, of course, help the people on the user list or on the wiki that are asking questions that you know the answers to. And this is something I think is really lacking at the moment. We could do a lot more marketing, and yeah, for instance, at the moment we don't really have marketing materials like fancy flyers and stuff. So yeah, help in this department is definitely appreciated. You can also help with reviewing code, especially, and you don't need to know MediaWiki or Semantic MediaWiki for this. It's entirely helpful to get the outside perspective, or if you're really well-versed with Postgres, then that's knowledge that's very much helpful for us. So you can make sure we're not doing this thing you could do a lot faster on Postgres, for instance. And of course, you can contribute actual code. But when you do so, don't just drop a patch and then run away, because there is a big chance that it will not get in then. Because, well, first of all, we want to have tests for the new code. And if you're changing existing code, we want it to be tested because we don't want to risk breaking things. And we probably want to talk to you about how the thing can be enhanced and how it can be maintained in the future. So if you don't do this, it will probably not get in. So please stick around and work with us on your feature or enhancement. You don't need to make big changes. Very small changes are also appreciated. So if you're seeing a typo somewhere on the wiki, then please fix it. And if you're browsing through the code and you see this weirdly named variable and you spend 5 minutes figuring out what it actually means, then you can improve, put this new knowledge into improving the name of the variable. And that's also much appreciated. So, yeah, I hope we will make as much progress during the next year as we've done during the last year. And really, it's up to the community to make this happen. So, are there any questions?
I've seen that Virtuoso version 6 is still used, but version 7 is around for at least a year. Is there a reason for that?
Because nobody got around to updating it, I guess.
Yeah, I tried to install version 7 and it was complicated. But yeah, but it's much faster than version 6, so I thought it might be a good step upward.
Yeah, I mean, if it works, then it's already helpful to document that it actually works and to document the additional steps you would need to take to make it work.
Yeah, okay, but maybe, yeah, but there's no test in the code. It actually worked for me, but I haven't tested everything else.
Yeah, so what I suggest you do is you create a new issue on our issue tracker about supporting version 7, and I'm sure MW James will jump onto the topic since he's the one that's been making most improvements to the Sparkle source.
Not so much a question but a comment. With our Vienna history wiki, we used 1.8.05, and all the other extensions that we used there, you can see it of course on the special page, was security checked by the IT department of the city of Vienna. So I don't know what they checked, but at least we have this official announcement or something like that, that this code is okay and secure, and so that's nice too. It took 3 months of testing, and I don't know what they did with it, but they said it's okay, it's cool.
Do you know what the future of semantic bundle is going to look like?
Well, I'm not really actively involved with maintaining semantic bundle at the moment anymore, but I'm guessing that Jeroen will just continue maintaining it. And I'm hoping it can be obsoleted at some point by having composer support for all the involved extensions, at which point we could just create a semantic bundle package, and you could say install semantic bundle of this version, and it would just pull in all the extensions and make sure they're compatible with each other. I mean, if you have the situation where they can all be installed, then it's very easy to make such bundles.
I was just going to ask how the state is using Composer. Are there many extensions that support it?
So at the moment, this is still pretty limited. So it's SMW and some extensions around it. Of course, the components it's using. And yeah, it's pretty easy for an extension author or maintainer to make their extension work with Composer. I've also written some blog posts on how to do this. So I would hope that more people in the future make their extensions installable via Composer. But at the moment, it's mostly just SMW and some extensions around it, and Wikibase and the things around it.
Any further questions? Seems not to be the case.
Okay, in that case, thanks for your attention.